Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk today about the flute solo from King Crimson's second album, In the Wake of Poseidon. In the Wake of Poseidon was released in 1970. I feel it's quite a different album from the first album, although people do make similarities between In the Court of the Crimson King and In the Wake of Poseidon. It has 5 song pieces on it, and the whole piece is the whole album is as varied as the first in terms of the dynamic quality of the music. King Crimson are one of those few bands who actually use dynamics for structural purposes. The first song is called "In Pictures of the City." It's a big song, loud, with a soft central section, back to loud at the end. Cadence and Cascade, about 2 groupies, is soft and fleeting. Third song, In the Wake of Poseidon, is like a King Crimson ballad, majestic, anthemic, hymn-like. The fourth song is Cat Food, which is Crimson's way of doing jazz rock, typically English way of doing jazz rock, really, and particularly influenced by Keith Tippett, of course, who played piano on the album. And the fifth piece is an instrumental piece called The Devil's Triangle, which is essentially a reworking of Gustav Holst's Mars from the Planet Suite. Crimson played Mars in the first version of the band, and it was the piece that usually ended the show. And then it subsequently In the Wake of Poseidon, it became known as the Devil's Triangle. It's a tripartite structure. Not a precise working of Mars, but similar in a sense. The band at this time was headed by Robert Fripp and Peter Sinfield. Of course, Ian MacDonald and Michael Giles and Greg Lake had all left by that point. But Greg Lake and Michael Giles did come back to play, to do vocals and play drums respectively. On the album is Keith Tippett playing piano, and also Gordon Haskell, who sings. The flute player at this particular moment in time was Mel Collins. And Mel had played for the Transatlantic Records band Circus and had seen King Crimson several times, was auditioned and subsequently joined. Cadence and Cascade is in E major. That is the intro, which is essentially E, A major over E, which is like a 4C chord, E major 7th, but moved up to the 4th fret, 4th position, and back to A, and then this little bridge. So those are essentially the chords. However, in the central flute solo and also in the coda, which include the flute parts, the chords are E, F sharp minor 7th, G sharp minor 7th, F sharp minor 7th. And Mel Collins plays this solo over the top of those chords. Now, this solo is tough. I think Mel just probably improvised it because each time he plays it, it sounds different. So, but this was obviously a favoured take. Um, it's magnificent. It bears some similarities to In the Court of the Crimson Kings solo, Ian's solo on in I Talk to the Wind, and also on In the Court of the Crimson King, but not quite. It's not modal. It's in E major. So if a flute player approaches this, it's a good idea to learn E major scale. So 4 sharps. So that's the first thing maybe to look at, E major scale. Let's have a look at the flute solo. I'll play it for you. Well, hopefully it's tough. So here it goes. So these are the chords: E, F sharp minor 7th, G sharp minor 7th, F sharp minor 7th. Here we go. Central solo. So that's the solo, which you'll hear from timing counter 220. This is the coda solo from 303. And of course, it stops there. It doesn't continue. It stops, and the song finishes. But my loop, of course, continued. Forgive me for that. Right. So let's just have a look at this. There are a lot of scales in this, and from 220, the middle solo, there's a run there from D sharp, low D sharp, although it begins on E, up to high F sharp. So what Mel's doing really is using E major 7th notes. On D sharp is a major 7th from E, and also F sharp, which is like a 9th. So 7ths and 9ths. And then also outlining the E major triad. So with a G sharp in the middle. I'll show you the music in a minute. In fact, let me just show you that run to begin with. There we are. And so you can see the way that works. So you have the E and the D sharp and the F sharp falling to E and of course B. E and B. Of course the G sharp in the middle of the run are all part of E major triad. The next part uses these little turns, I call them roulades, which of course Ian MacDonald used in I Talk to the Wind and Called the Crimson King. And you can hear the thirds again, also used in I Talk to the Wind, I think, or maybe the Called the Crimson King. Here it goes. So you can hear the scale coming down in thirds, and then again followed by a run, and then F sharp to D sharp, which again is the ninth and the major seventh, F sharp to D sharp. But what he does, he breaks up the rhythm. Before falling to B. And then that's interesting because what he's doing there is using double tonguing on each note of that particular scale. Let's have a look. It's just here at the end. So you can hear that. There's a similar passage in Poulenc's sonata for flute and piano, and I should have got it out and maybe I'll play that in a future flute tutorial. And there's a section of semiquavers where the player has to double tongue each semiquaver. So that's something that's worth doing. To practice it, you might play an E major scale, but tonguing each note. So you're double tonguing each note, and then speed it up. I've talked about double tonguing in a previous tutorial. Anyway, with this one. Wasn't quite right. Let me play it again. That's better. Again, it comes down in thirds. So there are a lot of these movements in thirds. Mozart's G major flute concerto has passages in thirds in G. As far as I remember, yes, I think it does. So Mel may know them, have known the Poulenc and the Mozart. He's a fantastic flautist and saxophonist. So I'm sure this was part of his repertoire growing up. The coda solo from 303 onwards is really a tour de force in not just in improvisation, but also in techniques. A lot of trills, little trills of a rapid alternation of written note to note above. So 1, 2. Which is worth looking at. Let me just get this down. Put that there. So that's how that's those. You've got the little trill at the beginning, and then this little mordant here. And that uses E's and B's, which of course are part of E major scales. Remember, the solo is being played over 3 chords: E, F sharp minor 7th, and G sharp minor 7th. Back to F sharp minor 7th, and back to E, and so on. So 1, 2. And And then you've got that little crush note, those little jazz, followed by thirds, and then a scale from G sharp up to B. And then these little fleeting double-tongued semiquavers again. And then 1, 2, which is really worth looking at. Third line from here. So you can probably see that. And then again down to D sharp, which is of course the major seventh from E. And then all the time he's outlining this scale using these 3 chords. That's very interesting because that is treated, those thirds coming down are treated as a quaver quintuplet, which extend from beat 2 to beat 3, but also with a dotted note in it. So the idea of that, I think, is just to make it sound freer. Jazz and blues players do not necessarily play on the beat; they extend over beats, and they crush beats, and the whole thing is free. It's ad-libbed. And then we get a play on suspensions, which is, here is a 4/3 suspension, essentially, A to G sharp. So it's that kind of thing. And then what he does is extend that idea in the next bar. He elaborates on it higher up, so he repeats it but varies it, a varied repetition, followed by these little upward scales. That's from B to B, and then the semiquaver double tongue notes. Then this is the most interesting part, I think, in the whole solo, and this is this bit here, the way he's going up and using C sharp as a core pitch and going back to C sharp with a group of semiquavers. Very quite remarkable, really. And he does it again, but this time he double tongues a note. And then again the scale up to B, and then we get a scale from E to high G sharp of double tongued semiquavers. That's a remarkable passage because, of course, it extends up to G sharp as high as you can go, comes down onto the D sharp, which is the major seventh again, and then down to a scale of thirds. But this time, instead of playing the scale of thirds rhythmically on the beat, what he does, he syncopates them. And that's that passage. That's the little scale here going all the way up, then the major sevenths. And then here's that little syncopated bit here, which is quite remarkable. Then he has a section where he uses D sharp to E trills in 2 registers, in the middle register and the low register. So if I play the syncopated bit followed by that, which is also remarkable because he's coming down slurring in octaves, which is right there. That is really worth knowing how to do. Practice that. You may be able to practice that with an upward scale. E major doing the same thing. And speed it up gradually. Then again, we get the scale this time from D sharp, the major seventh, to D sharp. And then there's the major sevenths again, which is beautiful. That uses that little bit at the end with the arpeggios, and another major seventh scale from D sharp up to F sharp. So again, we've already seen this previously. And then that ad lib ending, if you listen to the actual recording, you'll be able to hear how he brings the piece to a close. I think that's an absolutely remarkable solo. This is the middle solo, so if you want to have a look at it. I hope I've written that out correctly, Mel, if you ever see it. I wrote to him yesterday and told him I was struggling with it. I actually managed to do it anyway. It took me all day to transcribe it from the album. But it's I used to play it many years ago, but never wrote it down. Anyway, that's the first page of the coda solo. If you freeze the video, you should be able to see what the notes are. And that's the final page of the coda solo. Anyway, there we are. I hope you've enjoyed that video. This is a remarkable album. If you don't know it, get it and listen to it. Of course, there is Tamo de Jong's 12 Archetypes on the front. I remember walking into Plowman's Music Shop in May 1970, and I'd ordered this album, and I said to Mrs. Plowman, who was behind the counter, I said, isn't In the Wake of Poseidon by King Crimson in yet? And she said, oh, I'm not sure, I'll just go and have a look at it. And this album was sitting on the counter like that. I saw it, it was upside down, and I said, I think it's here, Mrs. Plowman. I'd never seen the cover, but I knew that was In the Wake of Poseidon. I had no idea why. I think I'd sort of, King Crimson music was entering my bones even then, or it was perhaps just psychically ingrained or whatever. Anyway, there we are. I hope you enjoyed that, and see you anon. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you for listening.